Sharyn, it's great to have you with us. Our listeners are going to be very intrigued with your passion for children, specifically homeless children. And we're very interested in knowing how you got your start with this, what developed that passion, and then how can we help and join you as we might encounter homeless children? How can we best serve those who are homeless? For those of us who watch the news, there are various statements, accounts of, I have heard a figure of nearly 300,000 children of illegal immigrants who are somewhere throughout the United States, and they may be homeless. We don't know exactly. And Sharyn, as I make that statement, I am merely repeating what the news broadcasters have said. I can't vouch for the validity of that, but at any rate, my guess is there are some number of homeless children. Sharyn, welcome aboard. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Marty. Well, I'll tell you, it was kind of an interesting, if you look at everything that happens in your life, you can look back and see how each event kind of guides you through your life. So when I was 12 years old, my parents adopted my brother Tony. He was only 4. And when he was 15, I was 24, and I took him away from my parents. We had a very violent household. And it's kind of crazy for a 24-year-old to raise a 15-year-old, but we got through it with flying colors. And in the process, I noticed there wasn't much for 15-year-olds to do. So I started an organization called Youth Enterprise, and the kids decided to clean up Chapman Town in Chico, which was like the projects. It was just beat up, and they hauled out trash and whitewashed fences. And as a reward, I let them have a dance. And we just did all kinds of things around town, and it was the very first work study program in California. So I got the kids school credit for working at a job because a lot of these kids, being farm kids, they were never going to go to college. That was just not in their future. And then I moved back to the San Francisco Bay Area after a time, and I got involved with local chambers and other organizations and was struck by this organization called Rubicon. And they took 6 kids per 5 homes, so 30 kids total, who had been sexually abused, typically by their own family members. And I started raising funds and raising awareness. I got involved with Easter seals for the kids who were handicapped to raise money for the camps that the kids would do over summertime. I did 10 golf tournaments for 10 years for nonprofit organizations to be able to raise funds and awareness. So the people who could afford to pay $150 to play golf, they have the awareness and the connection to then reach out in the communities and do something. So it was everything from the Boys and Girls Clubs to Boys Town of Italy. I mean, all kinds of programs. And I would just approach them and say, how about an extra 35,000 to 150,000 profit just for doing a golf tournament? And no one ever turned me down. So I was able to create this in a way that it raised community awareness. And I love doing that. So in 2000, my brother and I were sitting there. He ended up with colon cancer in 1998, and I asked him to come out to California. He was given 6 months to live, and 2 years later, we were sitting there having Christmas dinner. And he says, "You know, we have to do something to help kids that are living on the streets who don't have a sister like you." And I was like, "Oh my God." All the time I thought my brother was just a redneck cowboy, that wasn't really thinking about other people. But he had these amazing concepts. So he asked if we could do a school and to have it in Belize. He believes that Belize was the last spiritual sanction on earth. It wasn't tainted by the negativity like the people who go to Sedona, Arizona. They just dump all of their negativity. Like, I'm feeling bad, I'm having a bad relationship, I don't have a job, and they just dump that into the land. So if you're sensitive to energy, you end up feeling a little wonky. I mean, you get nervous and jerky in Sedona now. I do anyway. So my brother wanted the school in Belize. So we started in 2000. And then by 2012, I had 8 people who promised me funding. And each one fell apart. And the last one was heartbreaking because he said, sell my business, sell my house, sell my car. March 1st, 2012, I'm leaving for Zurich to sign on the bank account that was already open. So I was going to, everything was finally ready to go. And then the IMF froze his funds. And they said, no problem, it'll only be a month. Well, 6 months later, still hadn't happened. So my broker said, take the money you have from selling everything and look at foreign currency. And when I looked at it, because if you remember in 1985, Kuwait revalued, their currency was worth 0.00000135. And then overnight, it became 3.77 to $1. Well, that's like almost a 400,000% return. And our military had been over there, and a lot of these guys had just collected the Kuwait dinar as a souvenir, and they became millionaires overnight. So it was just a wonderful thing to have the veterans be able to experience something like that. So then I looked at, and it's Vietnamese dong, the Iraqi dinar, and the Zimbabwe zim. And there's economic reasons why all of these currencies are going to be revaluating, mostly because of the activity that China's done to support these countries. So a year ago, August, Iraq was allowed back into the World Trade Organization. And last week, they just announced that their currency is worth 3.77 in country for $1. So it just has to hit Forex, and then it has to hit the US, and then I'm off to Belize and running. So this is amazing. Today we have 700,000 children living on the streets without an adult, these kids are under 18 years old. They're living by themselves. They don't know where they're going to sleep tonight. They have no idea where their next meal is going to come from. So a lot of these kids get picked up for shoplifting for food or breaking into a building. And those are the kids that we have 5 judges so far. I'd like to have a judge in every state that will end up referring these kids to our program, and then we'll screen them. Do they need drug and alcohol counseling? Do they need programs to get them clean? Do they have mental issues? And then the kids at 15 can be emancipated so they can come to Belize on a student visa, and there's no question about it. So they'll have a 3-year high school program, and the required education is going to be in multimedia. So imagine if you could have learned history and math and science all in video format. How much more fun would that be? And we know that the kids will retain it much longer. But the real wonderful part about this program, there's 22 divisions from manufacturing to hotels to just everything will be a self-sustaining village in 3 to 5 years. And the kids will work in every one of the divisions. So they're going to learn construction, all the home ec. They're going to learn every sports there is. They're going to learn how to work in hotels, how to work with livestock, with agriculture. So by the time these kids are 18, they're going to know what they like. They're going to know what they're really passionate about. So there's, in the US, our kids end up going to school on the average for 6 to 7 years because they keep changing majors. And even after that, most of the kids never use their major for their employment. So they're not finding something that's fulfilling. And I think we miss out on a lot of education values. So when I went to school, which was a long time ago, I graduated in 1968, we were I'm going to say third from the top of all industrialized nations. Today, we're third from the bottom. So education has really fallen apart. Now, part of this, I think, and it's not fundamental, but part of this is we have no music in our schools anymore. Most of the drama is gone unless some of the schools support drama classes. The extracurricular activities are what engage the kids to make them want to continue in school. Sometimes these kids, that's the only classes that they really enjoy. And then our teachers are put into a position where they have to push kids through the education, whether they can pass or not, so that the school retains the financial support. So we have kids, like I worked with a couple of companies in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they had to set up a GED course on campus at their properties so that the kids could actually write and read. Now, literally graduate high school, they couldn't fill out a job application.
Hmm.
So
Now,
we have real problems here.
Sharon, you mentioned some international countries and currency. Is a lot of your funding, or are a lot of the homeless children in these international countries as opposed to being in the United States?
All of the kids that we'll take are in the United States. So the school will be funded 100% by the currency. So I will never have to do fundraising. Belize is the first campus. Then I was asked by the Board of Aboriginals in Australia to do a school there to re-educate the families about the Aboriginal culture. So we're going to duplicate the school in Australia, and then the next school will be in Canada for the Indigenous children. So I didn't know how bad it is in Canada for these homeless kids that are Indigenous in Canada. So we'll have 20 campuses in 20 years.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Now, your universities these are actual buildings as opposed to being virtual, or do you do in class, in person as well as virtual?
Not virtual so far, although I want to offer that to the US kids to be able to take the classes virtually. This is what the school's going to look like. So, taking the
Mhm.
kids off the streets and having them being raised in a castle. And then all of the kids will be involved. So, our education is very unique. So, the required curriculum, there's a 45-minute class, then a 45-minute discussion, and then the kids have to take that discussion that's filmed up to the studio and to edit it and tag it to the original course. So they have like a 2.5 hour immersion into each one of the classes as they take. So they don't have to do homework because the immersion is so deep that the kids are going to remember. So the only homework I think they're going to have is when they have to write papers, which is vitally important to their education, being able to learn how to articulate thoughts and ideas. But that's the only reason they'll have homework. Everything else will be done in classrooms. They'll have 20 children per classroom, one teacher and one teacher assistant. So very monitored, very closely watched to make sure the kids are moving forward in a progressive manner.
Two things come to mind. You meant you showed us the university that will be. So right now, how are you functioning as the universities in just whatever building is available at the various
No,
locations?
no, we haven't launched yet. I'm waiting for the funds to be released. I have 525 people coming from 66 countries to help me launch the project in Belize. They're all experts in their fields, everything from shipping to medical. We're going to have the most amazing alternative medical system available so that there will be no disease. So every disease can be treated on a natural basis like they do in India, like they do in China. And we're going to incorporate a lot of these things so that the kids aren't going to be given like antibiotics just because they cut their finger. There are natural antibiotics that are available.
All right. How would a child qualify? In other words, I'm assuming homeless, but then do you academically qualify them as well?
They don't have to be academically qualified, but they have to have no parents providing for them. So there are programs to help kids who have parents. The parents can qualify for these programs. Did you know that at 15 years old, our foster kids are just kicked out to the street? They're given the bag or the suitcase, usually it's a paper bag of their possessions, and the doors shut behind them, and they don't even know where they're going. There's no counseling, there's no guidance. 50% of the 700,000 children living on the streets today will end up dead or in prison by their 35th birthday. And to me, I can't imagine why someone in government hasn't stepped up and said enough of this nonsense. There has to be some way to take care of these kids. We kind of talked a little bit when we were getting to know a little more about involving people in the community. So there's Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, how many service organizations, and they do things like they'll make sure that sidewalks have handicap access, or they'll paint signs to make sure that things are more clear in a community. What if there was a building that was abandoned that could be converted to a space that the kids could sleep? I mean, at least sleep, right? And then what if there were people who could be engaged? The people who volunteer for crosswalk service at schools, those are the same kind of people who could volunteer and make sure that the kids are okay. What if people went to the restaurants and gathered the food that the restaurants didn't sell and provided it for the kids for those buildings so that the kids would have decent nutritious food? The restaurants just throw it away every day. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but Panera actually bakes extra bread to give away to homeless people every single day.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, so I support Panera wherever I can.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Very good to know. So, do you have a launch date for your Belize operation?
Well, I believe it'll be before the first of the year. We are just waiting for Iraq to be able to have their currency hit Forex. Once that happens, then it's a go. And I've got everybody. You would not believe how amazing these people are. One person's been with me for 10 years waiting for this to happen. The majority of the people between a year and 3 years. And they just go on with their life just like they always had. And then once I have the funds, they drop everything. The people in India, it takes them 30 days to get a visa to travel. And then other people can come within a week or 2 weeks. So we have this whole cycle. I even have a travel division within the organization that will arrange when people show up and then, what their families. We have 300 children coming with the employees.
Wow. You made a statement earlier, and I was totally unaware of this, that many foster children in the United States or maybe worldwide are released to the public to live on your own at age 15.
Exactly. Now,
Oh
who
my
in their
God.
right mind would think a 15-year-old could provide for themselves? It's just unexcusable for this country, our country, who has so much wealth, so many resources, so much wasted in this country, that these kids would be expected to live on their own. Now, the sad thing is, when you think about, they're homeless, so they can't afford to get like a shower every day. They can't have decent clothes to go show up for a job interview. They can't have food stamps because there is nowhere for them to register that that's their residence, and you have to have a residence to qualify for food stamps. So we've forced these kids into a life of crime, and that's our fault, because it's not up to them to change the laws in this country. It's up to the adults to stand up and say, we've got to do something to make this right.
So I want to ask, what's happening to these children if there's nothing for them? Uh, where do they go? Is
You'll
America's
see
not
them.
taking care of them? Uh-huh.
No, you'll see them. When you drive around next time, I want you know the rapid access syndrome? Like once you buy a blue car, all of a sudden you see lots of blue cars. So RAS, you're going to know now when you drive around and you're going to see a group of kids, and a couple might be in pajama bottoms, and they might have those rubber thongs for shoes. And you can kind of tell they're unkept. Maybe their hair isn't combed, their clothes are kind of crooked, wonky, whatever. You'll see. And those kids are homeless. So they're just out on the streets trying to figure out where they're going to sleep tonight. Where's their next meal coming from? I've met two kids. One boy, it just broke my heart. He went home from school at 12 years old. His mother moved with her boyfriend and didn't bother to tell him where she moved. So he had about 3 weeks left in the apartment that they were living in. And then he was out on the streets. And he fortunately ended up with kids that were 2 or 3 years older than him because he was 12. And they made sure he didn't get into the drug group and he didn't get into the sex trade because a lot of these kids are picked up for sex trade. So he managed to get through. And I met him when he was 24. He was in San Francisco with 6 other kids. And I just stop and talk to these kids. I mean, it's just like, I just want to know their story. And this young man carried around with him a 4-inch book about hemp. He and his crew traveled all around setting up community gardens and teaching people how to grow their own food naturally. And that's from a 12-year-old homeless boy. Imagine what that young man would have turned out to be if he had had the education and the support.
As we are aware of the homeless children, as you are just describing, are you aware of any illegalities in those who are compassionate for taking them into their home? In your early description, you seem to be portraying yourself as thrust into motherhood at an early age because you left an abusive home. You chose to work with your brother. So it's in that context where I say you chose motherhood at a very early age. But for others who have compassion for homeless children, is there anything illegal and just saying, hey, well, come on over for a meal, stay with us, and so forth, and we'll kind of take you under our arms?
It's an open agreement. So as long as the kids want to be there, as long as the home wants them there, there's nothing illegal about that. People have actually gone to court and managed to get legal custody of some of the kids. I mean, I met this man, he's on my team. He's had 50 foster kids.
Wow.
50. I mean, I can't even imagine a heart that big.
No, that's very unusual. The name Jacques Delorme comes to mind. Do you know him?
No, I don't. I'd like to.
I will tell you, I will do what I can to introduce you. He uh, he helps people to adapt to and learn about foster children. And I will do everything I can to reconnect with him. We had a podcast with him some time ago, and I think it'd be good for you two to meet. And yeah, you obviously have synergistic efforts, but I do think that learning how to uh, adapt to and care for the foster children, I think that is definitely what we need to learn about.
Thank you. I really believe that most people are so wrapped up in their lives that they don't even know this problem exists. And then once they do find out, I think that they will be in action. I'd love to have people go out in communities. Firemen typically work 4 days on, 4 days off. So they have time and they have other interests. And they're the kind of people who have the energy and enthusiasm to maybe work on programs like this. Policemen, they spend maybe 40, 60 hours a week working, but they never stop. When they're awake, they're usually involved in their community doing something, going into the schools and speaking to try to make sure kids understand policemen are there to help. There's so many different professionals. Ministers who have youth outreach programs could expand that youth outreach program. A lot of churches today have buildings that are not being used. Wouldn't it be great in every community if a church opened up a building and just allowed 20, 30 kids to be in a building and out of the weather? Winter is approaching fast, and these kids don't have anything. Now, next month is my birthday month, and every year on my birthday, this is the 9th year, I raise money to get coats. Last year, we were able to get coats for 800 children in Houston, where I was. And it's something that everybody can do. Have a church gather coats and blankets and then drive them around to the homeless kids. The Covenant House in Houston, they can have 5,000 kids, but there's 24,000 homeless children just in Houston. So there's not enough programs, and it's really unfortunate that there's not enough people aware. When we look at the wealth of this country, we're giving money to Africa. Why aren't we taking care of our own kids? It makes no sense. These kids get sick because they're out in the inclement weather. You know, they have no money to go to a doctor. They have no money to be able to, buy coats and heavy shoes and boots. I mean, the second young man that I met, he was 25 and he was wearing sandals. It was 54 degrees and he had pajama bottoms on. And I asked him, I said, "Are you homeless?" Which is kind of rude of me, but I kind of got that feeling. I'm kind of used to how they look. And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Can I buy you a meal?" So we sat down and had a hamburger together. And I talked about he talked about his story, and I asked him if, there were other things that he could do to help provide for himself. And there weren't any. He said, and this was in Visalia, California. And he said that there's nothing for the kids to do. So, that was where I started the coat drive. So I just went, okay. I took him to the store. I got him boots, 2 pairs of wool socks, pants, change of underwear, wool shirts, t-shirts, a hat, a, a blanket that was kind of like a sleeping bag blanket. So it was good to down to 24 degrees. And you wouldn't believe this kid just lit up. He finally had something. And I bought a bag that he could put everything in the bag. Right? One child. That's just one child. When we have 700,000 of them living on the streets today, and it's not their fault. It's like, unfortunately, and you've heard this, I think I was the first person to say it back in 1970, but we have to take a test to drive a car, but we don't have to take a test to have a child.
Mhm.
Which is more important? And why isn't there better education for teaching people how to be parents? If you had a home like I came from, where there was so much violence, there was no love or nurturing, and the kids were made to work. We used to cry when my dad had a day off because that meant from sunrise to sundown, we had to work the entire day. And so it was kind of unfair. We didn't really get a childhood, but that made me so sensitive. So that was perfect for me because it made me aware. But most people who have happy childhoods, they can't imagine what a child has to go through.
I understand that. Sharon, for our listeners who want to join you, learn more about, maybe financially support you, and so forth, how could they contact you? And you are all about Ultimate Business University, but how can a person best contact you?
The best is through the website. I'm also on Facebook, Ultimate Business UNIV.com. V is in Victor.com. That's for the website. My phone number is everywhere on the site, and I'm available on Facebook, LinkedIn. I meet so many people on LinkedIn that are really encouraged to do something in their own communities because they had no idea this problem existed.
No, I will tell you that it's very likely, and human trafficking is one of those things that exists all around us. We're just not totally aware of it. Similarly, homelessness, until we choose to get involved, that's just my perception. These things, these homeless children are going to exist all around us until we choose to become involved, have a passion in. That's just my perception of how things could be.
Absolutely. Once you're aware, and then you start talking to people, like you go to church and you get people in the church to be involved. People love helping each other. They really do. And I've found so many great communities that, people just step up when there's an issue. And that's what I want to encourage people to do. To me, I've never been a person who could just go home, put my feet up and watch TV. I mean, I don't know why, but it's just not my style. And so I always had to be involved in something. I look around and it's like, if I can change this or do that and make the world a better place, then that's my responsibility. It's up to me to make those changes.
No, and I appreciate your outreach. On behalf of our listeners, Sharyn, I want to thank you for your passion for reaching children. And we know that many times, whatever happens in our childhood, good or bad, frequently rolls over, carries over into our adulthood. And I would hope that we would want to engage with and be actively involved in those who are homeless at the moment. The best is yet to come. And while our past might help inspire our future, it doesn't necessarily define us except by our choice. And that is what I'm referring to now is the past and those abuses, whatever has happened in the past. Yep, that will be there, but that may inspire us, as it has with you, to impact and drive your passion for the future. Sharyn, thank you so much for everything you do and the inspiration that you are to, and the hope for children and the future they could have because you have chosen to become involved.
You're welcome, Marty and Rock. Thank you so much.
Thank you.